Several people work on a shared result at the same time, each on their own piece, none of them seeing the whole. At the end, everything is brought together. And then a simple question hangs in the air. Can the finished result be trusted if nobody has reviewed it in full? It was precisely this question that pushed a developer in the United States to the limit of what he could still answer for.
In the first part of this series, we got to know Steve Yegge, a developer with over 40 years of experience, including at Amazon, Google, and SourceGraph. He had 20 to 30 AI agents working on the same codebase at the same time, each in its own separate workspace. A work tree, that is, its own copy of the project, in which an agent can work undisturbed without getting in the other's way.
That was orchestration, distributing the work. Today comes the more uncomfortable part. The agents have delivered, but can you trust what they delivered?
And this is exactly where it gets serious. After 12 days with his tool Gastown, Yegge wrote a sentence that captures the whole problem. I have merged over 100 change proposals from nearly 50 contributors and added 44,000 lines of code that no human has looked at.
44,000 lines. No human. That's the abyss. If nobody is looking, why isn't that simply negligent?
Because between the agents and the shared main branch lies a series of checks. It isn't Yegge who reads the lines. A cascade of 4 layers checks them, from cheap and mechanical to expensive and human. Let's look at each one. And it's worth keeping in mind, each of these layers catches something different that the previous one cannot.
Let's start with the cheapest. What can actually be checked by a machine at all, entirely without human judgment?
3 things, very reliably. First, do the automated tests pass? That is, small programs that check whether the code still does what it is supposed to do. Second, is the form, the style correct? Are there any obvious slip-ups? Third, can the whole thing even be assembled without errors? These 3 together are called a gate, a barrier through which every proposal must first pass. In Yegge's setup, the part that handles this is called the refinery. And the iron rule is no agent pushes its work directly into the main branch. Never. Only through the barrier.
In practice, this is known as CI, the automated checks that run on every proposal, for example via GitHub Actions or GitLab. But a mechanical barrier only checks whether something runs. It doesn't solve a second problem. When 30 proposals are finished at the same time, how do you bring them together without them blowing each other up?
That is the second layer, conflict-free integration. The naive way would be to test each of the 30 proposals individually and merge them individually. At 10 minutes per test run, that would be 30 times 10, 300 minutes. And if just one of them is faulty, you've checked all the others for nothing.
There's a smarter way?
Considerably. You take all 30 at once, merge them together, and run the tests a single time. If the batch passes, done. All 30 land. If it fails, you halve the batch and test both halves. The bad half you halve again, and so on, until the one faulty proposal has been cornered. This halving, known in the field after the tool bores, which the Rust project used for years, needs, instead of 30 runs, only about 1 plus the base 2 logarithm of 30, roughly 6 runs. 6 times 10 minutes, so 60 instead of 300, 5 times faster.
With only 8 proposals, it would naively be 8 runs. With halving, 1 plus 3, so 4, already half. This row of proposals through which they are checked and threaded in one after another is called a merge queue. Good. Machines check whether it runs, but they say nothing about whether it is good, whether it is secure, whether it is built cleverly. Who probes the output specifically for weaknesses?
This is where the third layer comes in, adversarial review. Adversarial means hostile. Instead of an agent that helps build, you put a second one on the task, whose only job is to work against the output, to look for gaps. In Yegge's setup, dedicated review waves run across all the agents for this purpose. In other tools, you explicitly define such a reviewer agent. Check this code for security vulnerabilities. go through the known attack patterns.
Why a second one? Why doesn't the first check its own work?
Because that demonstrably works worse. Whoever built something checks their own work with the same blind spots they built it with. Their assumptions while building and while checking are the same. A fresh agent, with the explicit task of finding weaknesses, brings a different perspective. It does not share the original assumptions.
The machine checks whether it runs. An adversary agent looks for weaknesses. And yet, one question remains. Where in all of this is the human?
At the most delicate point, and only there is a boundary between what a machine can reliably safeguard and what requires human judgment. This boundary is called the trust boundary. Whether a test passes, a machine can decide. Whether an architecture holds up over time, whether a safety-critical decision is defensible, whether an agent suddenly wants to grant itself more powers than intended, that it cannot.
And that is exactly where human attention is directed. Selectively, not everywhere.
Exactly. Yegge uses two things for this. On the one hand, spot checks, which he calls sweeps, systematic passes that do not read every line, but check whether the whole thing is architecturally drifting off. If a human were to read every line, the entire speed gain would be gone. On the other hand, approval barriers at the trust boundary. Before an agent expands its scope of tasks, it needs an explicit green light. A human decides, and must answer for that decision.
And that is the real core. The cascade does not prevent every error, but it ensures that no result is approved without someone standing behind it with a justification. What machines can do more cheaply and reliably, they do first. What requires human judgment gets human attention, precisely where it matters most. The gain is not just quality. The gain is accountability. Who checked what, and why was it approved?
And that is also the answer to the black box. A reviewer, Mark Atwood, named the problem soberly. The product is a black box that we have to trust. So how do we do that? I have no idea. That's the load-bearing problem.
Yegge's answer to this is precisely not, I trust blindly. His answer is the cascade. One more pointer for anyone setting this up themselves. Yegge deliberately separates two things. He has an observer that watches continuously and reports when an agent stalls or drifts off. But this observer is not allowed to block anything, so that it does not itself become a bottleneck. Checking and blocking only happen at the barrier before merging. Keeping observing and blocking cleanly separated is the beginner's mistake you can spare yourself.
And a second, very practical one. The fun is not free. 30 agents at once burn through compute costs astonishingly quickly. An early user reported around $100 in a single day. Whoever waves everything through without barriers therefore pays twice. First, the compute time, then the errors that only show up after merging, when they are most expensive to fix.
44,000 lines that no human has read. What at first sounded like negligence turns out in the end to be the opposite. Not a single step of it without a barrier in front, without an adversary, without a human hand at the point that matters. Trust here does not arise from looking at every line. It arises from the fact that at every boundary, it is clear who stands behind it.